ever heard about the Cactus League that existed even before Major League Baseball? The small little thing that sent the framework for what it all is today? Well, I'm going to cover one of the teams from there. As people from the Chicago area who are told two things: to hate the Packers and to either root for the White Sox or the Cubs, depending on what side of the city you are from. Either the north side being the Cubs and the south side being the Sox. And I think knowing the history of the better team, obviously being the White Sox, should help you decide who to root for. I'm researching this because I have a connection to the White Sox because of my father, and I wanted to know more. During this speech, I will discuss how the White Sox started, some of the black spots in their history, and some of the achievements of the White Sox in history. It started in 1900 with the American League forming, and they started to grab teams from tons of other small leagues around the nation to create this big conglomerate that was now one half of Major League Baseball, the American League. And that is when the rumors all started to fly in Chicago. They say it best here on the MLB website. The rumors of the St. Paul franchise in the Western League moving to Chicago became a reality. They were bought by Charles Cominsky, who wasn't really a good guy and wasn't really known that well for when he did own the White Sox. But he's the one who ended up giving them their name. Not long after that, they played Illinois in their first ever exhibition game ever against, the University of Illinois, not any team from Illinois. And they won 10-9 in their first ever game as a team under the Chicago White Sox name. Then they got their schedule for the 1901 season, which was 140 games. Now it is 164 today. But back then it was still 140, and that's all they played. And in their first game, they played the Cleveland Indians, who are still the Cleveland Indians today. And they won 8-2 with their first franchise win ever as a Sox team, which feels real good to say 121 years later. Now that we talked about the start of the White Sox, let's talk about some of the dark spots in the history. Let's start with the 1919 White Sox, which are a real sore spot of our history. I cannot underestimate how big of our favorite we were going into the 1919 World Series. We were the biggest favorite that you could be. We were supposed to take them in 5 games, because it was a series of 8 back then, and just sweep them. We had star players Joe Jackson, Buck Weaver, and even Eddie Chitole, who at the time were doing very well in their own respective positions. But they were also being paid bad by Charles Cominsky, who really wasn't obviously a good owner and was honestly a shitty person to begin with. And that is when some gamblers step in. They said that the schemers used the team's discontent to their advantage, and through intermediaries, Rothstein offered relatively small sums of money for the players to lose some of the games. And this was off of the Grunge website. It is said that they offered around 60 to 100K for each player to throw these games, and that they lost 5 games to 3 games. To the Reds in the end, and it really was kind of a sad point in history. Then, the very next year, an investigation in 1920 by Kenesaw Mountis Landis, who was just the recently appointed commissioner only 2 years before, and a major player in the later half of the century, with not wanting black people to play in the league and being quite open about it. Well, he took all the 8 players that ended up being thought to have taken money, and he banned them from the entire league. There is no longer they are going to ever step on a field. This included Buck Weaver, who is said to have never even took the money, which really sucks because it killed his career at a very, very rapid pace. And this left a mark on the Sox known as the Black Sox for taking this money, and they were hated by the league for tainting this trophy for just some measly old cash and ruining what the game's all about and ruining this feat that you have to get this trophy. And they were really quite sad about it. And last but not least, we will talk about some of the franchise's greatest feats and accomplishments in the last 121 years of history. There was the 1906 hitless hitless Wonders, who ended up beating the Chicago Cubs 4-2 games, setting the stage for what we now know as the Crosstown Classic of today, and winning the only ever playoff game and World Series that both teams have played in, which is pretty good to say as a Chicago White Sox fan. The next one I'll talk about in history involves this man, who in 1922, they say, on April 30th, the rookie Charlie Robertson frustrated the Detroit Tigers all day pitching in the first perfect game in a White Sox history. This was off the Sports Encyclopedia website. This was only, and still currently, only one of 18 perfect games ever thrown in the history of the major leagues. And Detroit hitters were quite angry. They actually checked his clothes multiple times during the game to make sure he wasn't altering the ball down there, which is quite funny to me. Then, finally, the last one I'll be talking about. In 2005, the White Sox ended up getting back to the World Series again, and they were up against the Houston Astros, who, in 4-0, swept them and completed only losing one game in the entire playoffs to the Angels. And that was it. And this obviously took home the first championship in 88 years, which ended the second longest drought at the time, which first was held with the Cubs, who ended up ending it in 2018, and now it is held by Cleveland. But that ended the 88 years of no World Series. It ended a 40-year drought of the pennant, and it truly was one of the greatest moments in the White Sox history. In conclusion, today I talked about how the White Sox started, and about some of the darker parts of the history, and about the brighter times in history, and when it triumphed. Now that we talked about all these things about the Sox, there's only one more thing to do, which is root for the White Sox.